Everyone told 17-year-old Landon Price to give up, that saving both twin foals would cost too much, risk too much, and probably fail. But on a quiet Montana farm, surrounded by dust, doubt, and dying light, Landon made a promise to the Mare who raised him like kin. We're not giving up. Not now. Not ever. What happened next would touch millions, spark a viral storm, and prove that sometimes the quietest fights are the ones that change everything. The sun hung low over the wide, dusty plains of Montana, casting a warm, golden hue that softened everything it touched, except Landon's nerves. He stood at the fence, arms crossed, watching Rosie graze at the far end of the pasture. There was something in the way she moved. Slower, heavier, like she was carrying more than just weight, like she was carrying a secret. Rosie had always been steady, tough as weathered wood. Landon had ridden her since he was a boy, her black and white coat flashing through the fields like a memory that never faded. But now, her head hung lower, her steps a touch more careful, and that was enough to worry him. Dr. Carlson's truck rattled up the gravel drive around noon, dust trailing behind like a warning. He wasn't supposed to come until next week, but Landon had called him early that morning. The vet didn't argue, said he had a gut feeling too. Inside the barn, the air was thick with hay and heat. Landon led Rosie in slow, his hand firm on the rope, his other brushing her flank with a kind of reverence. She didn't resist, she trusted him. That only made it harder. Dr. Carlson didn't speak at first, just moved around Rosie in practiced silence, running calloused hands along her belly, eyes narrowing. He grunted once, then reached for his stethoscope, pressing it gently to her side. The soft thump of a heartbeat filled the room. But it wasn't just one. Landon stiffened. The vet looked up, face unreadable. "There's two," he said quietly. "She's carrying twins." For a second, Landon didn't move. The words hung in the air like dust in sunbeams, unbelievable, floating, real. Rosie, pregnant with twins. "That's good, right?" he asked, though he already sensed the answer. Dr. Carlson straightened, eyes grim. "It's rare, very rare, and risky. Most mares can't carry twins to term. One or both usually doesn't survive. Sometimes," he hesitated, "sometimes neither does the mare." Landon's breath caught. Rosie stood beside him, chewing lazily, unaware of the danger now etched into the space around them. She looked fine. She felt strong. "But she's healthy," Landon said, trying to hold on to something. The vet nodded, but not like it mattered. "Still, this isn't just a bump in the road, son. This is the road disappearing under you." Silence settled like evening fog. Landon placed a hand on Rosie's neck. Her skin twitched beneath his palm. She turned, just slightly, as if she knew. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. He'd made promises to her in childhood. Promises whispered on rides through golden fields. Promises wrapped in trust and saddle leather. If this was the fight, he was staying in it. The barn was quiet except for the soft shifting of Rosie's hooves on the straw-covered floor. Landon leaned against the stall door, arms folded, his jaw tight. Dr. Carlson stood a few feet away, clipboard in hand, but he wasn't writing, just staring at the mare like the weight of her future sat squarely on his shoulders. "I wish I had better news," the vet said finally, voice low. "But carrying twins it's a dangerous path, especially for a mare her age." Landon didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on Rosie, who stood chewing slowly, tail flicking lazily. She didn't know, couldn't know, that inside her, two lives stirred, maybe three, if things went wrong. "There's a way to improve her odds," Carlson continued, hesitating. "We can reduce the pregnancy, terminate one of the foals. It's a procedure I've done before, not often, but it can save her life." The words landed with a thud. Landon didn't move. "I know it sounds harsh, but statistically, no," Landon said, quiet but clear. Carlson blinked. "Son, I know how much she means to you, but this isn't just sentiment, it's science. You don't understand the risk." Landon turned then, slow and steady, his eyes hard. "I understand enough. She's more than a statistic. She's family." Rosie lifted her head, ears flicking toward the sound of his voice. Landon reached a hand toward her, fingers brushing her mane. His voice softened. "She's carried me through things I couldn't name. She's not just strong, she's Rosie." The vet sighed, looking older than usual. "You've got grit, I'll give you that. But grit doesn't stop complications. If she goes into labor early, if one foal's positioned wrong, we could lose them all. Landon's hand stayed on Rosie's neck. Her warmth steadied him. Then we fight, he said, voice firmer now. For both. A pause. The kind that sits between two people, like a line drawn in dust. Carlson closed the clipboard. All right, he said. Not agreement, just acceptance. But you'll need to be with her, every step, around the clock. You don't get to look away when it gets hard. I won't, Landon said. I never have. Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the cracks in the barn wall. Inside, something had shifted. A decision made not out of recklessness, but out of a deep, old promise. One boy and one horse, choosing each other no matter the odds. Carlson nodded once, and turned toward the door. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Keep her calm. Keep her strong. As the vet's truck rumbled down the road, Landon stayed in the barn, fingers buried in Rosie's mane. We're not giving up, he whispered. Not now, not ever. The days stretched long, like shadows at sundown. The early Montana spring brought slivers of warmth, but Landon felt cold more often than not in his skin, in his chest. That slow, aching kind of cold that comes from waiting too long for something you can't control. Rosie's belly grew, rounder by the day. Her gait slowed, her breath deeper. Landon noticed everything, how she favored her left side when she lay down, how her eyes lingered longer on the gate, as if wondering how far she could still run. But she never wandered far. She stayed close. So did he. He spent hours in the barn, hammering together fresh planks, measuring twice, cutting once. The new stall took 3 days to build. He padded the floor with extra straw, lined the walls with old wool blankets stitched together like a patchwork quilt of worry. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. It was ready. He placed a small wind chime above her stall door. Something soft, something to remind them both that even in silence there could be music. Twice a day. He knelt beside her, pressing the stethoscope against her side. The sounds inside her were strange and steady, like distant drums, muffled by snow. Each time he heard the 2 heartbeats, something tightened and loosened in him all at once. Proof they were still there, still fighting, still choosing to stay. His mother watched from a distance, never saying much. Just the occasional glance through the kitchen window, her lips pressed tight. She didn't believe the odds were in their favor. Landon knew it, but she never said the words aloud. Maybe she knew that saying it would make it real. Some evenings, Landon would just sit beside Rosie, leaning against the stall, his eyes half closed. He'd talk softly, more to himself than to her, about the coming summer, about the smell of cut wheat and the sting of sunburn, about names. If the foals made it when they made it, he wanted to be ready. Rosie would flick an ear, shift her weight, breathe deep. She never responded in the way people do. But that didn't mean she didn't answer. He didn't go into town much anymore, didn't answer many texts. His world had narrowed down to this barn, this mare, these unborn foals. Everything else could wait. There was something sacred about waiting, not passive, not weak, but active, intentional. Like standing watch beside something that mattered more than comfort or rest. The days blurred. The moon rose and fell like a quiet clock. And Landon kept watching Rosie like the sky watches the prairie, wide-eyed, patient and unblinking. The storm rolled in faster than the forecast said it would. 1 minute the horizon was painted in gold. The next it was swallowed whole by a wall of bruised gray. Wind sliced through the wheat fields, bending stalks low like they were praying. By the time the first crack of thunder split the sky, Landon was already running. The barn doors slammed against their hinges as he pushed inside. Breath caught in his throat. The power had flickered out minutes before, leaving only a single hanging lantern swaying in the rafters, its light casting long, crooked shadows. And there, near the center of the barn, Rosie was down. His boots skidded across the wet boards as he rushed to her. She lay on her side, legs tangled beneath her, nostrils flaring, chest rising in shallow, frantic gasps. For a second, he couldn't breathe either. The world went quiet, save for the storm clawing at the roof above them. "Rosie," he said, kneeling beside her, his voice shaking. Hey, it's okay, I'm here." Her eyes rolled toward him, wild with pain and panic. Her belly was stretched taut, heaving. One foal kicked from inside. He saw it, a ripple under her skin. A signal, they were still alive. But if she didn't stand soon, she wouldn't be for long. He tried to lift her, arms around her chest, shoulder against her side. Nothing. Her body buckled, heavier than it had ever felt. He grit his teeth and tried again, feet slipping in the straw. She cried out, a raw, desperate sound that split him in two. Come on, girl, he begged, tears hot and unwelcome behind his eyes. Don't quit on me now. He ran to the corner, grabbed the bale hook, shoved it under her flank as gently as he could. He wedged hay under her side for leverage, then braced himself and pushed. Rosie shifted, groaned, but didn't rise. Lightning flashed through the slats in the wall. Thunder followed so closely it felt like the sky might fall. Landon dropped to his knees, pressed his forehead against hers. His voice cracked. You don't get to leave me, he whispered. Not like this. Not now. Rosie twitched. Her ears flicked. Slowly, painfully, she tucked one leg beneath her. That was enough. Landon rose again, pushed with every ounce of strength he had left. Rosie wobbled, then stood. Just barely, but she stood. He backed away slowly, not breathing until she had steadied herself. Her sides quivered, foam at her mouth, but her eyes, those deep, knowing eyes, locked with his. The storm still raged outside, tearing at the barn like it wanted in. But in that small flickering space, they held the line together, still standing, still fighting. It started just before dawn. The barn was quiet, the storm long gone, leaving only a hush and the scent of damp earth. Landon had barely closed his eyes on the cot beside Rosie's stall when he heard it, a low, strained grunt. He was on his feet before he was fully awake. Rosie was on the ground again, but this time it was different. Her sides rippled with effort, muscles tightening in waves. Her eyes were wide, glassy. She was breathing heavy, too heavy. No, not yet, Landon muttered, fumbling for his phone. No service. The storm must have knocked out the tower. He grabbed the barn's old wall phone. Dead. He stood frozen, one hand on the receiver, one on his chest. The vet wasn't coming. It was just him. He rushed back to her, kneeling into the straw, heart thudding hard. Rosie groaned low, and suddenly, legs appeared, slick, pale, trembling. The first foal was coming fast, too fast. Landon reached out with both hands, palms damp with sweat, and guided the colt free as Rosie bore down again. Within minutes, the foal slid into the world, landing in the straw with a wet thump and a soft, gasping whinny. Landon laughed and cried in the same breath. A colt, strong, alive. But Rosie didn't stop. Her breathing grew more ragged, her body still strained. The second foal wasn't following like it should. Landon leaned in again, and felt it. Wrong position. No legs, no head, just pressure. Heavy, wrong pressure. He froze. Breach, he whispered. He'd read about it, watched a video once. But this wasn't theory. This was blood and breath, and time slipping too fast. Rosie groaned again, louder this time. Her eyes flicked to his, pleading, trusting. Help her. He swallowed the fear and pushed his arm inside, gentle but firm. Like the books said, he found a hoof, then another, but they were twisted, folded in a way that made movement nearly impossible. Come on, he whispered. Just move, just shift a little, please. The filly was stuck. Rosie's body strained again, harder. Landon felt it, her heartbeat pulsing against his forearm. Time was running out, and then movement. The second hoof slipped free. Landon gripped both and pulled as Rosie gave one last cry, a deep, soul-wrenching sound. The foal came loose, limp, small, still. Landon dropped to his knees beside her. No breath, no sound, nothing. Don't you dare, he said, rubbing her chest, clearing her nose, urging her into life. Don't you dare leave now. Seconds passed, then a cough, a twitch, a broken whimper. The filly gasped, and Landon fell back, breathless, straw sticking to his damp skin. The sun cracked over the horizon. Two foals blinked into the light. He had no words left, only tears, only Rosie, breathing slow, her eyes half closed. They had made it, all three of them. She wasn't moving. The filly lay still in the straw, slick with birth and too quiet. Her small chest didn't rise. Her legs were curled awkwardly, one eye half open but unfocused. Landon knelt beside her, hands shaking, heart hammering in his throat. "Come on," he whispered, pressing his fingers against her ribs, searching for movement. Nothing. Rosie groaned behind him, too weak to lift her head. The colt had stumbled to the corner, legs wobbly but alive, already blinking at the world. But the filly, she hadn't even taken her first breath. Landon wiped her nose with his sleeve, cleared her mouth, then rubbed her chest with both hands, firm and fast. He'd seen it done before, in videos, on calves, but never like this, never when it mattered so much. "You don't get to go," he said, voice breaking. "Not after all this, not now." The barn was too quiet, the silence pressed in on him like a weight. He kept rubbing, whispering, pleading. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time didn't behave right when everything hung on a breath. He leaned in close, forehead to hers. "Breathe, baby girl, please." Then there it was, a cough, wet, sputtering, small. The filly jerked once, legs twitching, then again, her chest lifted, shallow and weak, but it moved. Landon let out a sound, half laugh, half sob, as he cupped her head in his hands. "That's it," he whispered. "That's it. You're here." She tried to lift her head, but couldn't, so he helped, sliding a blanket beneath her, tucking straw around her tiny frame. Her ears flicked, her eyes blinked. She was trying, that's all he needed. Behind him, Rosie gave a long, ragged breath. He turned and crawled to her, pressing a hand to her flank. She was breathing, still, somehow, still. "Good girl," he said softly, stroking her neck. "You did it." Outside, the first rays of sunlight slipped through the cracks in the barn wall, painting everything gold and soft. The storm had passed. The fight, for now, was over. The colt wobbled back toward his sister, nudging her with a curious snort. She lifted her head, just barely, and they touched noses, newborns, bonded by breath and chance. Landon sat back, knees to his chest, watching them. Exhaustion settled in like dust, but he didn't care. He'd stay there all day if he had to. They were all still breathing. That was enough. They were only a few days old, but already the foals had taken over the barn like they'd always belonged there. The colt, long-legged and restless, kicked at shadows and chased his own tail in circles until he tumbled into the straw, unbothered by the fall. The filly, smaller, softer, watched him with quiet eyes, only moving when she had something worth moving for. Landon sat on the edge of the stall, chin resting on his forearms, just watching. It had become his new rhythm: chores, feed, check Rosie, watch the foals, over and over. And somehow, he didn't mind. He hadn't named them at first. It felt too soon, like naming them would be tempting fate. But now it felt like they'd earned it. He pointed at the colt, who was attempting, for the 5th time, to leap over a feed bucket and missing by miles. "Aspen," he murmured, "because nothing stands tall and shakes the world like you do." Then his gaze shifted to the filly, curled against Rosie's side, blinking slow and sure. "And you, Willow, gentle, steady, the kind of quiet that knows more than it says." Rosie lifted her head, as if she approved, her ears flicking toward him. Landon smiled. "Aspen and Willow," he said aloud, like he was carving it into the air. "That's who you are." As the days passed, their personalities bloomed. Aspen was wild from sunup to sundown, hooves drumming against the stall like thunder. He'd already broken a feed trough, tried to climb under the fence twice, and spooked himself with his own reflection in the water bucket. Landon couldn't help but laugh every time. Willow, in contrast, moved like a whisper. She trailed Rosie's every step, kept to the edges, and only approached Landon when he was quiet and still. But when she did, when she rested her head against his knee, or nudged his hand with that delicate nose, something in him settled. He saw himself in both of them. Aspen's fire, Willow's stillness, the push and pull he'd lived with his whole life. Out in the fields, he ran wild. In the barn, he breathed deep. The bond between them all grew like something ancient and true. Rosie trusted him more than ever, letting him guide the foals, letting him near, even in her most tired moments. The foals followed him like he was part of the herd. Word started to spread. A neighbor stopped by, then another. Someone had heard from someone else. Twin foals healthy, alive, a miracle. One visitor took a photo, then someone posted it online. Landon didn't think much of it at first, just a picture, just a story. But stories, he'd learn, have a way of finding the world when they need to, and the world had just found Aspen and Willow. It was supposed to be for his mom. Landon had taken the video on a quiet Tuesday morning, the barn doors flung open to let in the light, the air still wet with dew. Aspen had just found his balance, and was prancing in tight circles like the world was his to command. Willow stood nearby, watching her brother's antics, then almost shyly took her first wobbly steps. Landon had knelt in the straw, phone in hand, catching the moment like someone might catch a butterfly, carefully, quietly, hoping not to ruin the magic. 30 seconds, that's all it was. Just a colt full of mischief, and a filly full of grace, stepping into life, while Rosie watched from the shadows, tired but whole. He sent it to his mom, who forwarded it to his aunt, who posted it on her Facebook with a caption, "Miracle twins born on my nephew's farm in Montana, against all odds. Just watch this." By the next morning, everything changed. The shares came first, a few dozen, then a few hundred, then thousands. The video hit Twitter, then TikTok. Landon didn't even have an account, but suddenly his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The first call came from a local reporter, then the state paper, then a woman from New York, who said she worked for a national news outlet, and asked if they could do a feature. Landon wasn't sure what to say. He hung up twice before calling her back. Within days they showed up, cameras, tripods, crew vans that kicked up dust along the gravel road. They all asked the same things. What was it like? Why didn't you give up? Can we film the Foals again? Landon tried to answer, but the words felt clumsy in his mouth. He wasn't a storyteller. He was a kid who refused to let go of something he loved. They called him brave, called him a symbol of rural resilience. One article said his refusal to terminate a twin pregnancy was an inspiring act of faith in a world addicted to convenience. He didn't feel inspiring. He felt tired. The barn, once his quiet place, now echoed with voices and footsteps he didn't recognize. People leaned over the stall to snap pictures of Willow. Parents asked if Aspen could be pet by their children. Rosie flinched. Landon clenched his fists. He hadn't asked for this. And yet, every night, he sat with the foals like always, Aspen curled against his boot, Willow resting her head in the crook of his arm. Rosie dozed beside them. The cameras never caught those moments, just him and the ones he stayed up for, fought for, bled and bent for. The world had named him Hope, but in that barn, he was still just Landon. By the end of the second week, the gravel road looked more like a parking lot. They came in vans and SUVs, on foot with cameras slung around their necks, and wide-eyed kids trailing behind. Some brought flowers, others brought questions. A few brought nothing but curiosity, and phones already recording. At first, Landon tried to be polite. He answered what he could, waved off what he couldn't. But every time a stranger leaned over the fence to snap a photo of Aspen rearing in the field, or Willow curled beside Rosie in the straw, something in his chest pulled tight. The barn didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage. Rosie stopped eating as much. The foals startled more easily. And every night, Landon sat on the porch with his mother, watching taillights disappear into the dark, wondering how something meant to be sacred had become spectacle. "It's not just a story to them," she said softly, folding her hands in her lap. "It's a headline, a photo op. They don't know what it cost." Landon didn't answer. He already knew what he had to do. The next morning, he hammered a sign onto the gate with 2 nails and 1 deep breath. It was nothing fancy. Black paint on an old cedar plank, the words uneven but certain: "No visitors. Private property. Please respect our peace." He stepped back, arms crossed, and stared at it like it might talk him out of it. It didn't. By afternoon, the backlash rolled in. People called it unfair, said they'd driven hours. One woman cried, clutching her phone, insisting she had a right to see the miracle twins. A man yelled something about missing the point of hope. Landon didn't reply. Rosie came first. The foals came first. That was the whole point. The crowds thinned, but didn't vanish. A few lingered outside the gate, taking photos from a distance. Others sent letters, left gifts. A child's drawing of Aspen taped to the fence. A note that said, "Thank you for not giving up." Still, it felt lonely. The barn was quiet again, and Landon should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt hollow, like he'd turned away something big and beautiful, but necessary. He stood beside Rosie that evening, watching Willow press against her side, while Aspen chewed on a length of rope like it owed him something. "You're safe now," Landon whispered, fingers brushing Rosie's mane. "No more flashes, no more noise." He looked out the open barn door, past the fields, toward the setting sun. There's a cost to protecting peace. He knew that now, and he was willing to pay it. The first call came just after sunrise. A neighbor's voice crackled through the line, low, urgent, scared. "2 of our mares are down. Vet says it's equine influenza. It's moving fast." Landon didn't speak, just nodded like the other man could see him through the silence. When the call ended, he stood in the kitchen for a moment, hands still on the receiver, stomach turning cold. Then he moved. By the time the sun crested the fields, he'd already closed off half the barn. He dragged bales of hay to block off the rear stalls, scrubbed out water buckets with bleach, set up a quarantine zone. Rosie, Aspen, and Willow were led into the new padded stall he'd built months earlier, once for birth, now for survival. He wiped down every gate latch, every tool handle, every inch of wood he touched. His hands were raw before noon. When Rosie coughed for the first time, just once, low and dry, it didn't sound like much, but Landon heard it like a gunshot. He pressed his forehead to hers, feeling the warmth of her breath. "Too warm." "Not now," he whispered. "Please, not after everything." The vet arrived that afternoon, his truck screeching to a stop in a swirl of dust. He didn't knock. He didn't chat, just got to work. Vaccines for the whole herd, emergency boosters for Rosie, vitamins, electrolytes, strict instructions, isolation, vigilance. Wait and watch. Landon took it all in, wrote it down, memorized it like scripture. The vet didn't sugarcoat anything. If the virus took hold, they might not have time to respond. That night, Landon didn't sleep. He sat just outside the stall, knees drawn to his chest, listening. Rosie coughed twice more. Aspen stirred restlessly. Willow stayed tucked beside her mother, still and quiet. The barn creaked with wind, and every gust sounded like warning. But Landon didn't move. He stayed rooted, watching, waiting, holding the line with nothing but his breath and a quiet promise. "I won't lose you," he murmured to the dark. "Not like this." The next morning, Rosie coughed again, but less, and the day after, not at all. No fever, no nasal discharge. Aspen kicked at the stall door like he'd been locked in too long. Willow nuzzled into Landon's shoulder and stayed there, slowly, like frost melting from fence posts. The tension eased. The rest of the herd remained healthy. The barn held. The fever didn't come. They had made it through. Landon stood by the pasture fence days later, eyes on the horizon, the wind gentler now. Behind him, the foals played. It hadn't taken much to break the world open, just a cough, but it hadn't taken much to hold it together either, just grit, and the kind of love that doesn't let go. Aspen cleared the fence like he'd grown wings. Landon had turned for just a second, just long enough to check the latch on the gate, when he heard the thud of hooves and the sharp rustle of straw. By the time he spun around, Aspen was already across the pasture, tail high, legs flying like he didn't know the earth could hold him back. "Aspen," Landon shouted, more out of reflex than anger. The colt kicked his heels up in reply, wild and unbothered. He stood at the fence, watching as Aspen tore across the field in wide, uneven loops, as if the sky itself had dared him to run. His muscles moved like liquid steel, all power and promise, no fear. He tripped once, just slightly, and rolled through it like it was part of the plan. Back in the barn, Willow stood behind the fence he had just leapt. She didn't follow. She never did. She watched, not with worry, not with jealousy, just with that calm, unreadable gaze she always carried, like she already understood the lesson Aspen hadn't learned yet, that there's more to strength than speed. Landon walked to her, resting his hand on her neck. She blinked slowly and leaned into him. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The difference between them was stark. Aspen was fire, a storm, all motion and sound and defiance. Willow was still water, deep, cool, unshaken. She didn't need to chase the wind. She studied it, felt it, and let it move around her. And Landon saw himself in both. He remembered being 10 and racing through these same fields, his legs too long for his body, his heart too big for his chest. He remembered falling, bleeding, getting back up before anyone saw. Aspen was that part of him, reckless and shining. But Willow was something else. The part of him that had grown quieter over time. The part that had sat with Rosie, night after night, waiting through silence and fear. The part that had chosen stillness over escape. Together, they reminded him why he stayed, why he fought, why he didn't give in when everyone said it wasn't worth the risk, because some lives aren't just lived, they're shared. Later, Aspen trotted back toward the barn, breathless and proud, coat shining in the afternoon light. Willow met him halfway, nuzzling him once before curling against Rosie's side. Landon leaned against the stall post, arms crossed, dust on his boots and straw in his hair. He'd never had to teach them to love each other. They just did, and in their bond, in their balance, he saw it clearly now. He hadn't just saved them, they were saving him too. The idea had been circling for weeks, brought up in emails, pitched over phone calls, mentioned by people who hadn't been there for the hard nights, the blood, the trembling hands. At first, Landon dismissed it. He wasn't a writer, he was a farm kid who refused to walk away. But the story wouldn't let him go. It whispered through the barn rafters as he mucked stalls. It sat with him on the fence as he watched Aspen tear across the pasture and Willow trace Rosie's slow steps with quiet grace. It clung to the silence between chores, in the way Rosie sometimes turned her head, just enough to meet his eyes, as if she knew, as if she remembered. One night, after the foals had curled into sleep and the barn had gone still, he pulled out an old notebook from a drawer in the kitchen. Its pages were blank, yellowed slightly at the edges. He stared at it for a long while. Then he wrote the title across the top of the first page, Born Twice, the Rosie story. He didn't know where the words came from at first. They just arrived, slowly, unevenly, honest. He wrote about the diagnosis, about the vet's face when he said terminate, about how his hands shook the first time he felt 2 heartbeats, about the storm and the fall, about Rosie's breath against his shoulder in the dark. He wrote about the silence before the filly's first cry, about Aspen's fire, about Willow's calm, about the long wait, the fear, the small stubborn kind of love that refuses to give in. And the more he wrote, the more he realized it wasn't a story about foals, it wasn't even about a miracle. It was about choosing to believe in something when everything logical said, don't, choosing to stay beside someone, horse or human, when walking away would have been easier, choosing to love when loss was the more certain path. That's what Rosie had done, that's what he had done, and somehow they'd made it through. By the time he reached the final page, the sun was rising, light poured through the kitchen window, gold and forgiving. The foals stirred in the distance. Rosie lifted her head. Landon closed the notebook and pressed his hand to the cover. He hadn't written it for money, or press, or likes. He wrote it for the ones who might find themselves in the dark someday, holding on to a life that felt too fragile to keep. He wrote it so they'd know what he did, that miracles aren't made in hospitals or headlines. They're made in the moments when you stay, even when you don't know how the story ends. The sky burned gold as the sun dipped low over the pasture, setting the fields on fire in the softest way. The wind was quiet, not gone, just gentle. Like it too had learned to settle. Landon sat on the old fence, boots kicked up on the lower rail, elbows resting on his knees. He'd fixed that fence twice this year. Once after Aspen tried to jump it, once after Willow leaned into it during a storm. Steady as ever, bracing against the wind. They were bigger now. Leaner, stronger. Aspen still ran like he was chasing lightning, wild, untamed, glorious. Willow moved like the wind's second thought, soft, deliberate, and sure. Rosie grazed not far from them. Her coat dappled with gray around the muzzle now, but her eyes were bright, her gait, proud. She had made it. They all had. Landon watched them run, Aspen leading, Willow close behind. Side by side in that way they always were. No show, no audience, just the rhythm of hooves in the dirt and the sound of the world breathing. He didn't hear his mother approach, but he felt her when she sat beside him. Same fence, same posture. Years of silence shared like conversation. There's something else, she said, her voice quiet, not wanting to break the spell. Landon nodded. Yeah. They watched together as the foals, no, not foals anymore, looped the far side of the pasture. Rosie lifted her head, and let out a soft whinny, and they came trotting back, slowing only when they reached her side. His mother nudged him gently with her shoulder. "You ever think we'd be here again? Just us?" Landon didn't answer right away. He thought of the crowd at the gate, the cameras, the storm, the cough, the sign, the book, the nights he hadn't slept, and the mornings he didn't know how to begin. And then he looked back at the field. Aspen pawed at the dirt like it had challenged him. Willow nuzzled Rosie's neck with that same quiet tenderness that had never changed. "No," he said finally, "but I hoped." The breeze shifted, carrying the faint scent of earth and hay. His mother let out a soft sigh, like something she'd held onto for too long had finally let go. They sat in silence for a while, watching the horses ease into stillness beneath the fading sun. No crowds, no cameras, no voices begging for a moment they hadn't earned. Just a boy, now a man, who'd chosen to believe when belief was the hardest thing, and the 3 lives that answered his faith with their own. The fence creaked gently beneath them as Landon leaned back, eyes on the sky, heart full. Some stories don't need to be told, they just need to be lived. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like Oars Along, comment, and subscribe for more powerful true stories of love, resilience, and second chances. Share this video with someone who still believes in quiet miracles and the strength of staying.